This has nothing to do with my presentation, but it is a flow map that I thought was really cool. And it works even when you're not online. You can adjust the flow speed. It's put together by some programmers in the Czech Republic. That's so cool. All right. Here we are. Hello to all of you in Colorado Springs, as well as those of you watching on the live feed, and welcome to the last presentation of the early morning session at PCD. My name is Matthew Hampton. I'm a cartographer from the Portland, Oregon area, and I'm grateful to be here and share this recent work. Thanks to Metro for bringing me here, and thanks to all of you at NACIS for bringing this conference to the middle of North America. Next year we'll be back east in the Northeast, and I hope in 2018 we'll be back to the West Coast. We'll see. There's some new faces around here, so a little bit more about me. Based on this great map by Jake Coolidge, this sort of lets me see my whole life in front of me because it displays the Columbia River Gorge where I've lived my whole life. I work as a principal cartographer and a GIS analyst for the planning division at Metro. It's a planning organization for the 24 cities and 3 counties around the Portland, Oregon region. And as a regional planning agency, we monitor and analyze transportation, land use, demographic shifts, economic growth, housing and development, as well as protecting natural areas. We developed a 2040 vision plan 38 years ago. So most of my work is related to sharing current and future patterns of urban growth, conservation of open spaces, and preservation of farmland to help maintain the awesomeness and quality of life that we have been enjoying in the recent past. I've worked at Metro and been part of NACIS for a long time, ever since I had that I found my people moment at Portland in 2001. And I've served on the board of directors for 2 terms, and I highly encourage you to give back to the community and do the same. My work typically involves programs that are going in cycles, 3 to 4 year cycles, like the Regional Transportation Plan, the MTIP, the Active Transportation Plan, and all of these need maps and graphics. But we've been looking to communicate through some other means, and we've been putting together these quarterly snapshots that look at jobs, housing, transportation, community change, and it allows for a lot more interactive development of story maps and other content to help support this narrative. And speaking of rich narrative, I just want to give a quick shout out to ESRI's Story Map team for developing the Story Map Cascade template. I was given a pile of really good content this summer, and I was able to put together a really nice piece that's being highlighted as a Story Map of the Month for October. I want you to check it out and see the great work of 11 amazing girls in Portland who took a 5-week camp this summer to create documentaries. I think it's pretty well done. All right, back to maps. Here is a map that was created over 40 years ago by a colleague, Alan Holstead, before I even had an inkling of being a cartographer. This graphic is hand-drawn with perfectly overlapping strokes. The image shows a lot of information beautifully and intuitively, even without any labels. This version has all the titles, labels, and legends information missing, but you can still see some information and get some traction on what's going on. And it's beautiful because it was done by a human, not a computer. First off, the hand-drawn lines are really elegant, and they subtly interweave between the polygons. The width are represented by the value, and you can see the relative magnitudes of the flow between these polygons. The 8 different colors used provide a really nice palette, and the flow lines are drawn with a nice radial curve. And even though there wasn't a Pantone palette of 1,000 colors, these ones picked are work really well. So what do you think is the most powerful color in this? I think it's white. Each polygon has some quantitatively sized vertical bars representing the value. But do you see much else? I'm sure some people can see county boundaries. But what about the scale? Is this to scale? Well, the only scale is this, and it's not representative of the geography at all. It's only representative of the data. The geography has been abstracted to focus on the scale of commuters using a standard graduated scale. The size of the stacked bars are representative of the total numbers of workers in the area that commute, and the lower part of the bar breaks off to show the commute flow. So if we add the labels back, you can really fully comprehend this. There are 6 different geographies, the 4 different counties, as well as the city of Portland and the central business district nested inside. The legend breaks down so that you can see the total number of people who work in the city of Portland. That's 142,000. 94,700, that's 67%, stay within the city of Portland, and the other 33% travel off into other parts of the region. And so my job was to try and recreate this. And I was remembering last year's NACIS in Minneapolis, where there were some flow maps generated by computers, but I wanted to do this by hand. I wanted to do this semi-automated, but I wanted to be able to control the look and feel manually to make it look really nice. But first, I needed some data. Is anyone familiar with U.S. Census's LODES data, the LOTUS data, or LEHD? It's a really good data set. Who here has used the On the Map tool to pull data down? I think it's one of the best tools around. LODES stands for, the L stands for something I'll get to in a second, but the ODES stands for the Origin, Destination, Employment Statistics. And the L in LODES is an acronym itself. It stands for the Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics. And so there's a nested acronym, which I think is kind of cool too. But it's a great data set. Side story, last month there was 2 people from the Census Bureau who came to Metro to give us an update on all the Census Bureau stuff. There's a career person who worked there 25 years, and he couldn't wait to try and work with this data set because it actually combines data and creates new data. It's based on the quarterly census of earnings and wages by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the QCEW is a restricted data set because it's based on unemployment insurance, and the businesses don't really want to give that out. So you have to follow stringent requirements to use the data, and you can't really aggregate it and show it into larger proportions. And so the Census Bureau created this LODES data set, which is synthetic. A friend at work made a semi-variogram of the QCEW and compared it to the LODES, and there's a slight shift. It's called synthetic so they can get around with using it, but it reflects the actual patterns, and it works really well. But using the On the Map, you can drill down to any census geography. You can even upload other geographies you want if you want to get different geographies. And you can pull down a massive amount of information. Types of employment, what workers live there, how much they make, what their ethnic background is, how much schooling they've had, a whole bunch of information. But here I've selected the Portland Metropolitan Statistical Area to run some analyses. And you can pull a whole bunch of information. There's just a wide variety of information you can pull. We are looking for primarily a home trip to work, so the home to work trip. And after running the query, you get a whole bunch of background information, and you can bring it into GIS, which I did here. This is, I think, QGIS, and the lines have been styled by graduated symbols. The 11 polygons were returned on this, and it looks like a huge mess right here. I exported it over to Illustrator and pulled the geographies apart to create some white space, and you can see things are starting to look okay. Not so bad. I added the flow lines for Washington County here. This is where Nike and Intel are, and just to make this a little bit easier to see, you can apply some non-destructive effects in Illustrator using the warp tool. I use the arc, upper and lower arcs, to create these flows dynamically, and you can move them around until you get the right look and feel that you want. There's a few different sliders to explore and treat the lines differently depending upon their aspect and their angle and their orientation. Sometimes you might want to change the direction of the inflection to curve up or down to get a more harmonious look, and it all depends on the way the line is. And after spending some time with this and moving these lines around, I stepped back and I thought this was not so good at all. In fact, this is awful. And to make it even worse, I added a drop shadow, and then And then I just threw it away. This was not the right way to go, not the right approach. You want to simplify things, and so I stepped way back and just tried to simplify things as best I could. So this was a little bit better. It's definitely heading in the right direction. You get the flow information, but you don't get any of the quantitative data, and maybe this was a little too simple. But reducing the number of counties was definitely a big help. So I was finally able to get a handle on taming the visual complexity. The graduated arrows are again sized by volume, and the flow line has the actual values associated with them. Adding pie charts or halos on the left show the representative percentage of workers that leave for work, and created another level of understanding. There's still a little bit of frenetic noise here. I was kind of wondering at this point, does the actual shape of the geography make much difference? Do people understand these geographies by looking at them? Do they provide much intentional meaning? I wasn't quite so sure. You can see that Clackamas County is huge comparative to all the others, but that isn't really the information we were looking for. So I took it another step further, and with a little more refinement, this one is finalized for production using the colors that are in our palette. And I kind of like these. Has anyone seen anything like this before? I'm not quite sure what to call these, octopies, or maybe flow pies. I'm not so sure, but I think it pretty effectively explains the information about the commuting flows between these different geographies. You can clearly see that Multnomah County has 66% of the people who stay and live in Multnomah County. Only 34% leave. Most of those that leave go to Washington County to work for Intel and Nike. Both Washington County and Clark County are pretty evenly split with respect to their jobs to housing, or their reflective workflow. But Clackamas County, you can see exports most of their jobs to the adjoining counties. And so this is what I came up with in terms of trying to recreate that flow diagram from 1970. It's not quite exactly perfect. It doesn't break out the city of Portland, but we've got another cycle of the RTP coming up, and so I'm gonna take another whack at it. So stay tuned for more.
We have time for questions. Thanks for your talk. I loved seeing your workflow, how you ended up where you did. Wondering about the importance of the unit of a county, because someone could literally just commute right over a county border and have a shorter commute than maybe someone who stays within their county but has to go further. So did you think about that at all in designing this, and do you have any thoughts on maybe keeping that in mind?
Right, yeah, there's certainly some boundary effects that can occur, and we haven't found a way to solve that yet. We're looking at sort of the 50,000 foot level as a regional metropolitan planning organization. At the local level, there's probably some other ways of managing that, perhaps using different geographies, looking at maybe the density of employment and using the employment density to help create different catchment basins to understand the look and flow of that. But yeah, that's a good question.
Hi, I worked on the LEHD thing, cool. So what a thrill to see it actually being used. Have you used the On the Map for Emergency Management tool that they have with your planning?
I've not seen the emergency management planning with On the Map, but yeah, that sounds really interesting. I love the work that are the data that you're able to access as well as the tool itself.
Yeah, it's really cool. Let's talk afterwards about the emergency management thing.
Awesome, I'll check it out.
Other questions?
Great, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Matt.